I'm
This
going to start off
conference
with
will
just
now be recorded.
now just the usual stuff before I even get started with that. If you want CEUs, got to listen to the whole presentation. Got to be after the presentation is over, you need to send to Irene at Bakersfield ARC three things that you learned today. And based off of that, we'll send it to you. If you have other people from your agency also on uh, your webinar site, we need to get their names too if they want credit. Also, Valerie will be monitoring throughout the presentation today to make sure people are on for the whole presentation and we work together on this. So with that said, this presentation will be presented this week, and something very similar to this will be presented next week for residential providers with a little bit different take to it. And then the following week, I will be doing something on what constitutes a behind the scenes in the IPP. Now, today I'm going to be talking specifically about the new format. Um, the law changed last year in when they passed the budget. With the budget, they also have what they call trailer bill language. And in that trailer bill, there was something that said that the state needed to develop a person-centered IPP that would be used throughout the state. And so a committee met throughout last year, and the law said that they had to have it ready to go by June 30th, and it had to be fully implemented by January 1 of 2025. Now, if you look at the memo that's on the screen, it's from the Department of Developmental Services. Let's see if I can get it here. Uh, uh, yeah, Department of Developmental Services memo. And if you look at the date here, June 28th. So they made it by 2 days. They did get it out in time. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, this standardized individual program plan template and procedures. So you'll get
Sorry
a little
to
bit of,
interrupt, but I did put that in the chat if anybody wants to go ahead and have that saved for future reference.
okay, yeah. So if you want to download this document, and it's a multiple document. There's a couple of pages of explanation as to why they did this. Then there is the actual documents. There are two different ones. You can use one of the two for the IPP. Then there is also a purchase of service form that needs to be done at the annual review that they're now going to be including. And then finally, there is a training manual, primarily for service coordinators and program managers at regional centers to use that DDS developed. But it would be good for, I think, your staffs as well. So I'm making this available to you all. It's public document. But before we do that, I'd like to share with you. Sometimes I get asked about HCBS and why it's so important. I mean, what's the big deal? Why are the feds making such a challenge to the system? California is where it's at. We're the ones who are providing all the services, not the feds. But then I ran across this article the other day in Disability Scoops. Disability Scoops is a subscription service. If any of you are interested, it costs $50 a year, and it comes out twice a week on Tuesdays and Fridays. And they give you a number of articles related to the intellectual and developmental disabilities from throughout the country. So it's a good place to find some information about what's going on. Um, Anybody want to guess what the federal government spent on to support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in 2021?
For the state of California or for the whole entire
Well,
nation?
for the whole country.
$1 billion.
Times that by 80. So the state of the federal
Negative $80
government,
billion.
the federal government spent $80.6 billion to support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in 2021 alone. And what let's see, let me go on here. Spending on estimated 7,570,000 Americans with developmental disabilities. So there are about 7.5 million people in the United States who qualify for developmental disability services, and the federal government spent like $80.5 billion on those individuals. And went towards everything from supported living to family support, personal assistance, supported employment, accounting for roughly 0.1 of the government's $6.8 trillion budget. So 1/10 of 1% of the entire federal government's budget went to developmental disability services. So, not like servicing the debt, not what education costs, not what defense costs, other things, but it's still a pretty good chunk of money. So the feds have a lot of skin in this game and are able to really dictate a lot of the policies and procedures predicated on the huge amount of money that they're putting into the system nationwide. The biggest chunk of the federal money, 87%, went towards services provided through Medicaid. So this is exactly what we're talking about, Medicaid waiver. So the bulk of the money that the federal government put into the programs in the 50 states and Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico and the other territories was through the Medicaid waiver program. With $73.6 billion dedicated to community living and just $7 billion for institutions. Now, this is interesting because for those of you who've heard me speak before, when the waiver program first came out, what they were saying is, okay, the federal government would pay for institutional care, they wouldn't pay for community care. And so they started a waiver to allow some people who were living in the community to get services. So they waived the requirement that people be in institutional care into the community. Well, today, 87 cents on every dollar is going to the community. And only, 13% is going to the institution. So as my old boss used to say, maybe we need to change the language and call the institution the waiver and not call the community the waiver, because the community is where the services are being provided. So like I say, $73.6 billion this was in 2021, the most recent data available, and just $7 billion was for institution. That split has become increasingly prominent in the decades since the 1980s. So since the early 1980s, when the movement to move people out of state hospitals, developmental centers, and out of nursing homes and hospitals really got started. Since then, you've seen this rapid increase. $9.1 billion went to supported living in 2021, while $9 billion was devoted to family support. $4.66 billion to personal assistance, $860 million to supported employment. And it says that the total public spending on support and services for people with developmental disabilities varied substantially by state, the report found, accounting for less than 1% to as much as 6% of a state's budget. Now, California would probably be closer to that higher end. As you may or may not have remembered from some of my previous presentations, there are some states that are providing minimal services and only to those folks who are on the waiver, and they decide in the state legislature how many people to put on waiver. So if let's say, for example, a state says we're going to have 100,000 people this year receiving developmental disability services through our waiver program. Then those 100,000 people who are on the waiver get services. Anyone else who hasn't qualified for the waiver or who is on the waiting list because they're the 100,001th person, they don't get services. Or in some states, they get a minimal amount of support or respite, but very, very little. So depending on the state, the amount of money that's spent. In California, because again, we're an entitlement, anybody walking in the door of the regional center gets services. We have a system that provides services whether you're a waiver client or not. So there really is no waiting list for services in California. There is sort of a quasi waiting list in the fact that with the rates the way they are right now, a lot of programs have difficulty finding staff and are not taking new clients. And so people who then say, I want a new service, and I want, like, let's say, tailored day service, where there's only 1 or 2 providers in town, and they're full. And so, you know, you can get on a waiting list to get that service, but you can't really get that service right now. So there is a little bit of a waiting list in California, but not a real not to get eligibility and not to get in the door. Okay, so moving on. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation today, the state has now developed a new format that all regional centers will have to start using as of January 1, 2025. This memo here is from the Department of Developmental Services directed to all the 21 regional center directors. And anything that gets sent out is public information in California. So it's out there for anyone to read. And it talks a little bit about the background of this, the standardized template, which I'm going to share with you in a minute. And then there's also a signature page, which we're going to talk about briefly. And then there's a guide for regional centers to use with their staff. But again, I would encourage you to take a look at that guide and see how it's relevant to both your participation in the IPP and also your development of an ISP, so that your ISP, your individual service plan that you're writing for your the person in your program, dovetails with the regional center plan. It's not like this. Yeah. And then, so here's, like I said, the implementation guidelines. June 30th, they have to have the template out, which they did. They're going to be working with the statewide computer system that the regional centers use to get it so that they can get it out there. So in all likelihood, your coordinator will come out with their pad or with their laptop, and will be doing it electronically. This can be done by hand, but more than likely it won't be doing. And then there'll be a series of trainings that the department will be putting out, and then it will be implemented by January 1 at all 21 regional centers. And then in June of next year, the state's going to look at it to see how it panned out. So here is the new document, and we're going to be talking about this in some depth this morning. My individual program plan, and first and foremost, it has all of the sort of bureaucratic information that you need to have: legal name, UCI is Universal Client Identifier. It's a 7-digit number that's given to every client in the system. Date of birth, meeting date, if it's an amended plan, and then also the next review date. And then there's certain drop-down items that you'll see on this because it's computerized. Select type of plan. Is it an initial plan? First time you ever did an IPP for this person? Is it an annual, the yearly one? For those clients who aren't on waiver, some get either 2-year or 3-year reviews. And if it's an amendment, what's new or changing, services, other significant transition period. Why is it being amended if it's being amended? Okay, so there are different sections, and we're going to talk about these in some depth in a few minutes. But basically, the introduction. Who is the person? And this can be a bit of a challenge for service coordinators who are brand new. So if you're experiencing, as we've seen over the last few years, a lot of turnover at the regional center, uh, that person, this may be the first time that coordinator has met with that individual. So their understanding of who that person is can be somewhat limited. So this is where you, along with their family, if they're in residential type setting or supported living, can really help to bring out and help that individual share. Uh, I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't really like to share a lot of stuff about me with somebody I haven't met before. I like to get to know you before I share, especially things that are more sensitive to me. So this is an important area to the plan. But where you as a provider can really have a pivotal impact in helping this process of making sure that this is a meaningful document. Because in those situations where the coordinator has limited knowledge of the individual, you can really share some of that. How was this plan developed? Did it happen in a meeting? Which part did I choose to play in making the plan? Uh, who asked to help? Okay, then it really talks about visions for the future. And again, we're going to go into this a little bit more depth in a few minutes. I just wanted to share the actual physical document. What are the short and long term plans? So, what are we talking about over this next year, and then maybe 5 and 10 years down the line? So maybe an individual who is in an adult day service, and what they're saying is, yeah, I would like over the next few years to really be working at a restaurant, fast food restaurant, maybe. And so I'd like to really learn the skills necessary to do that. So short-term goals might be working on some goals related to presentation, social awareness, community, etc., with a long-term goal of possibly employment. Communication, how does that person communicate with others? And what are ways that you need to know when you're communicating with me? Um, if I'm an individual on the autism spectrum scale, maybe I feel uncomfortable in a room with a lot of individuals sitting around the table, especially if there isn't a lot of distance between me and someone else. If I, have some challenges with space, some other things could be a challenge. Decision making, when making decisions about, and then you can pick the area, the supports I want from others, the people who will assist me are, and then the outcomes I desire in each of the areas that I've picked to be part of my plan. And why is it important to me? And then finally, the state is really concerned that our individuals have emergency planning. When If you go back and look at most of the major natural disasters which have occurred in the United States over the last 15 or 20 years, one of the things that you'll notice is that people with disabilities are far more affected by those disasters than are the typical population. Our folks don't necessarily have transportation so if there's an evacuation order, their ability to get out of the situation is not as good. Their understanding of what the events are that are occurring can be somewhat limited. Their poverty it creates challenges as well. So there's a number of issues that put our individuals at a greater risk when emergency situations occur. And therefore, we want to have a plan in place for everyone to try to mitigate some of that emergency risk that people may experience. Now, there are two formats. There's one that's a little bit more personalized, if we can put the person's name and some other things into it, but they're basically the same document, just a little bit different. Now, there's also another form here, which I'd just like to share briefly, and then we're going to go back and do some work specific with the IPP document. This is a second document that will need to be filled out at every annual review meeting. Okay, or if there's a request by the client or the agency or the service provider for an addended meeting, this will take place. And again, all the information. There is interesting a box about whether this was a remote meeting. The legislature just approved ongoing for it had sunsetted the ability to do IPPs remotely. It's now been extended. So for those individuals who would like to do their plan over Zoom or have some of the participants being on Zoom, not everybody in the room, that can be done by especially that box. Type of plan, if you drop down, and again, yearly or amended, and then why is it amended? To make changes, whatever. And then you talk about, okay, what are the services and supports? So is it an adult day program? So let's say they're talking about your specific program. So I'm just going to use, let's say, social vocational services. And then, or is the support going to be provider to be determined? So it may be a case where everybody at the meeting agrees that the person needs this type of service. But now under home and community-based waiver, it's all about the individual making choices and to be given opportunities to look at the different choices that are out there and then to be able to make the one that they would really meets their hopes and dreams. So in some cases, the team may decide that yes, indeed, an adult work program, supported employment, paid internship, tailored day, community integrated employment, whatever one is considered to be the best for that person at that meeting, we can then go ahead and start the process by checking the box provider to be determined. So that means that then the individual will be given options and will be helped out in the community to look at the different providers to see what the providers can offer them, to talk to those providers, and then to make a choice. You want to have a start date and an end date. Start date can be a little bit of a challenge if you were still trying to figure out who that provider is. It's just, and if you know at the bottom it says note the approximate start date of an existing service will be the date of the IPP unless otherwise indicated. New services will require time to initiate and complete referrals and may take longer to begin. So if the meeting is held and now the individual is going to go out and look at 2 or 3 programs, if those are available. In some communities, there really isn't a lot of option. And so that the choices may be somewhat limited for that individual. And then we want to really work with that 1 or 2 providers that are out there and seeing how they can help that individual to design a program specific to their needs within the program that they're offering. And then end date, how much? 5 days a week, 3 days a week, whatever. And then how, or actually take that back. 6 hours a day, 3 hours a day, 24 hours for maybe if it's a supported living services a week. So some amount, and then how often? 5 days a week, every day, 2 days a week, whatever. So, and these are services that are being funded by the regional center. So this plan is supposed to then delineate all of the services that regional center will fund for that for the next coming year. So if we're doing this plan on the birth month for that individual, these are the services that we're looking at providing that person until a year from now to the next birth month. Can change during the year if the individual says, I don't want to go to that services anymore, and it's specifically written into the name of the provider. Then that can be changed. We can do it. It can be amended as we noted above. So yeah, change. Then we can go to below that are funded by other sources. Now, this is where we really get into generic resources. The Lanterman Act, the law that sets up regional centers, has a section. Sometimes you'll hear it. It's 40. Let's see, 4559, 4549, 4559. It is the section of the Lanterman Act, the Welfare and Institutions Code, that specifically says that if there is a service that is available to the general public, so that everyone in the community can obtain that service, then individuals with developmental disabilities should be able to obtain that service as well. A example of that was a number of years ago down in San Diego. The county of San Diego said to the regional centers, hey, you've got supported living. So if one of your people, if someone that you serve needs supports in the home, you can provide it. You don't need to go to IHSS to get that. You just do it yourself. And San Diego Regional Center actually took the county of San Diego to court, and the Superior Court ruled no, IHSS is a generic service. It's available to anyone who has Medi-Cal, who is eligible for IHSS. An assessment needs to be done in the number of hours that they receive, consistent with how they treat everyone else in that program. How they do assessments to other people's hours should be done for people with developmental disabilities. Then, if that person needs hours in addition to the hours that were provided by in-home support, then regional center can provide those additional hours. But since IHSS is available to the general public who meets the criteria, it needs to be made available to persons with developmental disabilities. So regional center in the law is the funding source of last resort. So we're supposed to use any other funding that's available out there before we use regional center purchase of service dollars. So that can be for youngsters, public school. So we don't buy day programs. In the past, some regional centers bought after school programs. Most of those are gone now, but there is some social recreational services that are provided by some regional centers in the afternoon, specific for persons who have developmental disabilities to be integrated in with typical youngsters who are receiving social recreation in the afternoon. There are other resources there's Kern County Behavioral Health. So if somebody has a secondary diagnosis of a mental health challenge that meets the criteria for Department of Mental Health, and just like um, developmental disabilities, you got to meet the 5 categories of developmental disabilities to get in the front door. And so if somebody comes to Kern Regional Center and says, hey, my son has a learning disability, they'll say, sorry, learning disability in and of itself is not an eligible condition. You can't receive services from Regional Center. Mental health also has eligibility criteria. And this sometimes can create a bit of a challenge, because there are sometimes the Regional Center will tell an individual, oh, you have some pretty uh, pervasive behavioral challenges, some other issues. We think you could get services from Kern County Behavioral Health. And then the person goes over to Kern County Behavioral Health. Kern County Behavioral Health does a preliminary assessment, says, oh, this person's developmentally disabled. No, we're not really the service provider for developmentally disabled. That should be Regional Center. And they may or may not have looked at whether there was a secondary diagnosis. And is that secondary diagnosis really a mental health disorder? So sometimes you have people who have some behavioral challenges, and behavioral challenges in and of themselves are not necessarily an eligible condition. Is it oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder? There's some other conditions, and then even those need to meet criteria for mental health services. But considering the fact that somebody does have, let's say, anxiety or depression, and they do get secondary services from Kern County Behavioral Health, that would be here. If, for example, maybe the individual has if the services could be potentially be provided by Medi-Cal, or maybe because of the parent death or some other issue, that individual also is eligible for Medicare as well as Medi-Cal. That could go there. Some people have private insurance. I used to work for a company that if you had a son or daughter who was developmentally disabled, where normally somebody goes off the policy at 25, an individual could stay on the policy beyond 25 as long as it was a lifetime disability. And so some people might have private insurance. The Department of Rehab would be another resource that people could utilize. So the state is really trying to track how much service people are receiving from sources outside of purchase of service dollars, so that we can really get a better picture of the full array of services that an individual is receiving, because it's not just about what we buy for people, it's how we create lives for people. And there are a number of other services out there for the rest of the day. It's not just about the 6 hours that they're at our day program. So we want to make sure that we're acknowledging that in this plan. Agreement of services, please select all of this. Really important to note, okay, agreement on all services. So if we're sitting at the meeting, and at the end of that meeting, everybody around the table says, yeah, we agree. This is a good plan. We like that. Boom, you check that. Then the other box there is agree on some or no services. The individuals at that meeting may have asked for something, and the regional center says, no, we can't provide that, or I got to take that back to my manager and find out if that's something that we can buy, or that's not consistent with our purchase of service policies. And so they may at that meeting either deny or defer a request for a purchase of service. Now, what's supposed to happen, and the state's now acknowledging that and put it into this document, is the additional requests. So if I've made requests and you can't honor that at that meeting, the regional center can't, the representative that's there isn't able to, I agree, as discussed with my team, to hold an IPP meeting on, and they give a date. This will be held within 15 days, because that's what the law says. If you can't meet the requirements at that meeting of deciding and having everybody agree, then you're supposed to reconvene the IPP meeting. I may cancel the second meeting if my concerns regarding the service and supports are resolved to my satisfaction before the end of the 15-day period. So the regional center has to come back with basically a counter proposal, or to either give you what you're requesting or try to help you find some other way to get that. If the regional center cannot meet your request, or if they do two other things. So if they say no to a new request, if they say, oh, you've been getting this service for a while. So for example, you've been getting in-home support or SLS at 30 hours a week. And we think you're doing better. And we think we can cut that down to 20 hours a week. So that's our proposal for your plan for this next year. And you say, no, I really believe that I continue to need 30. It works really well for me. Don't mess with success. And we can't agree at that meeting. And then finally, if the regional center says, you know what, we don't think you're benefiting from that in-home support services, so we're just going to discontinue it. And you don't agree with that. Those three things. So brand new service you're requesting, they say no. They look at decreasing in existing services or eliminating existing services. The regional center, by law, if you disagree, has to send you what's called a notice of proposed action. And like everything in the regional center system, it has an abbreviation. So it is a NOPA, N-O-P-A, and that must be provided in the person's preferred language. So if someone is non-English speaking, that document needs to be in the language of their choice. It needs to be sent out by a certified mail, return receipt requested. Once the person receives it, that starts the time frame by which the appeal is. Appeals are 30 days. You have 30 days to return the document. If you appeal during the first 10 days of that and you are currently receiving a service, the regional center cannot decrease it or eliminate it until it goes before the process and gets resolved in the process. So if you are receiving a service and the regional says we want to decrease it, and you appeal during the first 10 days because they have to give you 30 days before they decrease the service, then that service has to continue. You go through the process. It at some point gets resolved. Maybe you compromise and you get half what you requested, or you get the full thing you requested, or a judge comes in and says, no, the regional center was right in their decision. Then it can be changed, but it can't be changed if you appeal during the first 10 days. If you appeal during day 11 through 30, the service can be reduced, eliminated at the end of 30, but you still can go through the appeals process, and then if you win, you can get it reinstated. So you need to read the instructions, and as providers of services, you're an advocate for that individual. So you really should be there to help them to understand that process and make sure that they know at the meeting, first of all, that wait a minute, if you disagree, check that box that says that you disagree, that you want an additional meeting, that you agree with on some or no services, rather than just saying, oh yeah, we agree, even though we didn't like what you are offering us. We want to make sure that, because this gets back to the whole idea of meeting people's hopes and dreams and really trying to get services that are in line with what their families, their support system, everyone around that person feel is the best for them. And then there's another box here that says, are there exceptions to setting requirements? Now, if you have had a HCVS evaluation done of your program, which I know that at least two of the providers here on this today, I did. So I know two of you have. One of the things that we talked about was, what if you have an individual in your program that some of the rules that HCBS set up are not, won't work for that person. There are health and safety issues that prevent you from doing that. Now, this tends to be more of a problem with residential facilities than it does for day services, although it can be a problem for day services too. So an example for that might be someone who has diabetes and needs to be on a restricted diet. And let's say maybe if you're a day service and you're taking groups of clients out into the community, working with them on purchasing meals and what have you, maybe you need to take a much stronger role in working with that particular client and restrict them from being able to make a complete choice about what they want to order at the restaurant. That needs to be in their plan. And there's a whole policy and procedure on how you go about doing that. The HCBS rules have like 5 different things that you need to do to put into restrictions into someone's plan, and they want that noted right here on this page. So are there exceptions to setting requirements, yes or no? So again, the right to have visitors, and some places have restrictions on that. For residential, sometimes a lock on the door can be a challenge for certain individuals. The use of restraints, if there is going to be used, that has to be within a certain parameters and training, and there are a number of requirements around that. So those are just an example. Then I have been provided a statement of all the services and supports the regional centers purchased for me for the last year. So regional centers by law are supposed to be giving every individual a list of what services and how much was spent on them in the previous year. So usually those are sent out yearly to people by mail. You in all likelihood aren't necessarily seeing those, but those are out there. And then there's one here, blank will hold IPP meetings as necessary as my desired outcome and needs change. This may happen every year if I'm enrolled in a Medicaid waiver, or less often, up to 3 years otherwise. So, and then the regional center coordinator is responsible for the plan. So you're just certifying that you understand how this process works. And then, would you like a copy of your plan? And if you do you want it electronically or email? And then they want everyone to get there to be a discussion at that individual plan meeting about self-determination, the program where someone can develop their own plan and get the funds that would have been gone into vendor purchase of services, and can buy other types of services. There's an additional program out there called participant directed services that people can choose services about what services they get in their own home, and some community living, and that's also available to folks. So the regional center staff are required to make sure that the individual and their family are aware of these different options. Educating yourself about these is helpful, so that when the meeting's occurring, if the client or the family looks to you and says, wait a minute, can they still go here if I do this program, or what's going on, you could be able to answer that. Next item on here is a 4731 complaint. If you have anything, if you're receiving services from the regional center, and you're involved with somebody who is, You can file a complaint if you feel that those services are being denied or somehow abused or unfairly provided. There's also a whistleblower policy that if you see anything illegal or not right, or services aren't being provided consistent with the plan, you or the client, their family, anybody can file a complaint with the state, and the state will review that in a non-prejudicial manner. They can't come back and say, "Oh, you filed a complaint against us." I had a situation a number of years ago that a client complained about some things that her DSPs were doing, and she complained to her conservator. The conservator then went to the regional center and to the administrators of the program. The next time that conservator talked to that individual said, "I'm mad at you." "Why are you mad at me?" "Well, you got me into trouble." "How did I get you in trouble?" "Well, the staff came and told me that you finked them, and now they don't want to talk to me." Well, that was retaliation. The client had every right to share that they were upset about something that their staff had done, and then that it went up, sort of up the chain of command, came back down to the DSPs. But the DSPs, instead of making the changes that they needed to do to work with the client, they came back and sort of retaliated against that individual. Can't do that. That's not consistent with the rules of the whistleblower policies. California is an employment first state, so that we're really supposed to talk to individuals about the options for employment. National Voter Registration Act, there is a requirement, and so that at every IPP they ask the client, "Are you registered to vote?" And they need to do that to assure that people have a right to vote if they so choose. And there's also people have a right to a transportation plan. So if somebody wants to have a plan developed for them so that they can use public transportation, the regional center is supposed to do that consistent with this. So that's a little bit about that. Let me, go back here and okay. This is the how the plan was developed on the screen now.
No, there's nothing. It's just us.
Let me go here. Let me. Oh,
All
there
right,
it goes.
we got something
Okay.
up now.
So we only have about 10 minutes. I sort of went over on the other stuff, but let me do this really quickly. Okay, so these are the questions that are going to be asked in the meeting. Where did my meeting happen? Oops, that's the second one. Let me go back up here. Okay, the first one is the introduction. Somehow the let me. All right. The introduction section to the IPP is an opportunity for the individual in a positive and person-centered way. The information captured in this section can be gathered through a discovery process and focus on important things to know about the individual, what people like and admire about the individual, and the successes the individual would like others to know about. So things to think about when you're doing this section: the person's culture and their identity, their preferred name, the pronouns they would like to use. That some people have alternative lifestyles. We want to be sensitive to that. Interests. That what is this person interested in? Do they have spirituality? Are they involved with church or other spiritual type of activities? And then their preferred language. What languages do they speak and speak at the home? How this plan was developed. In planning for the IPP meeting, it's important to consider the preferences and needs of the individual and their circle of supports. A circle of support typically includes people chosen by the individual and their parents. This may include family members, friends, caregivers, teachers, mentors, neighbors, and professionals. The circle members should be committed to well-being and development of the individual. IPP meetings should be conducted at a place and a time that is comfortable to the individual. Individuals decide where they want their plan, not the service coordinator or the day program. So you need to ask the individual, where do you want your planned meeting to take place? The IPP should be an opportunity for the individual to decide who provides input into their plan and what type of information is provided. For young children who may have difficulty sitting through a long meeting, how planning team captures and wants and needs expressions should be indicated here. So if the family's doing that for children, but we're not really working with children, the vision for the future. And you remember as young children, many of us were asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? From an early age, planning for the future shapes our experience and how we live our lives. This section offers an opportunity to lift the voices of individuals and their circle of supports and sharing their supports for short and long-term goals. This section might focus on one area of the individual's life where they want to see changes or have goals, while others or different areas of their life for someone else. So some short things to talk about: tasks that the individual might want to learn, activities that the individual might want to participate in, time-limited goals, long-term visions for their lifestyle and way they want to live their life. Where do they want to live? Do they want to live with their family? Do they want to live independently? Do they want to live group home? Long-term goals. This thing's not cooperating this morning. Visions okay, long-term goals around things such as education, career, community, living relationships. For those individuals whose care providers are aging, what are the long-term plans to support those folks? Now, we have a lot of folks in the system who are baby boomers. They were born in the 50s and 60s and are now getting into their 50s, 60s, 70s, and have parents who are in their 70s and 80s. And in many cases, those parents are now starting to need care. And so at these meetings, we need to start talking about where the person's going to reside, what services are they going to be receiving, how they're going to continue to be supported once that natural support, the parent or the brother and sister or whomever is providing that service, isn't necessarily available anymore. Now, it's just about 11 o'clock. We're clearly not going to get to everything. Still three people on the call. Anybody have any questions or concerns about this new format? Like we were saying, Valerie put up there how you can go about getting this information. It is on the DDS website, and we did put on a link to that. And you can get both the letter that came out from DDS, the 3 sets of forms, and a guide on how to use these forms. And good information in that guide. And it could be a good teaching tool for working with your staff in terms of developing plans, because in terms of your individual service plans that you're developing for your residents. Okay, anything else? This presentation will repeat again next Wednesday at 10, with the one exception that it will be more focused on residential providers. But in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about what constitutes an ideal IPP. So here we talked about the format of how they want the document written, but what should go in there? It's not about just filling in the blanks. It's about really developing a plan that is of value to that individual and that also derives the services that you provide. So you've got somewhere that you're working off of. So that with that plan, you're able to figure out, okay, we really want to direct our services for Mary towards getting more social skills, because that's what she said. She really wants to be more involved with outside community activities. But she's a bit, she has some challenges right now because she tends to get right up into people's faces. She interrupts all the time. She doesn't, it's not reciprocal conversation. So what are the skills that we need to work with her specific to Mary on developing that social skill that she would like to see so that she can be out more in the community? So it's a good tool to use. In addition, there is, well, that's, I think, really the focus of where we are today. So again, any last questions?
I
Well,
just
thank
want to
you.
say thank you, Jeff. Ruth said thank you for the information as well. Thank everyone for being with us today too.
Yeah, well, yeah, clearly, we do appreciate you getting on. Let your colleagues know that these presentations are occurring every month, and we will see you in the near future again, hopefully. Have a good day.
Right. Have a good day, Jeff.